Remembering the victims, families mourn the lives lost in the shooting down of Malaysian Flight 17. Pope Francis personally calls Middle East leaders who joined him last month in a prayer for peace. Summer camp for special kids. We share their adventure tonight. And that giant leap from mankind, the first moon landing, is now 45 years ago. We flash back to July 20th, 1969. Those stories and much more on EWTN News Nightly for this Friday, July 18th, 2014.
We don't have time for games. We need to know exactly what happened, and everybody needs to make sure that we're holding accountable those who committed this outrage.
President Obama at the White House earlier today. I'm Brian Patrick. As we look at your news now, who bears the responsibility for the downing of a Malaysia Airlines jet over hostile territory in Ukraine? The president and the world wants answers tonight. Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 took off from Amsterdam shortly after noon local time, but it never reached its final destination of Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. The plane was shot down over eastern Ukraine, a volatile area where Ukrainian forces have been battling pro-Russian separatists. All 298 people on board were killed.
The flight's passengers and crew came from many different countries. But today, regardless of nationality, we are all united in grief.
Ukraine's president was quick to blame the pro-Russian militants, saying, "I want to point your attention to the fact that we call it neither accident nor catastrophe. It's a terrorist attack." Those are his words. Russian President Vladimir Putin, meanwhile, says Ukraine is to blame. He says, quote, "This tragedy would not have happened if there had been peace on that land, or in any case, if military operations in southeastern Ukraine had not been renewed." As for the White House, both President Obama and Vice President Biden offered their condolences, but stopped short of placing blame.
The United States will offer any assistance we can to help determine what happened and why. And as a country, our thoughts and prayers are with all the families of the passengers.
Much of the wreckage remains scattered across this rural area. It's a collection of clues investigators hope will help determine exactly how the plane was taken down and ultimately who is responsible. Ukraine's security services releases what they say are intercepted telephone conversations implicating the rebels in the downing of Flight 17. In the first call, the security services says a rebel commander tells a Russian military intelligence officer the rebel forces shot down a plane. In the second call, also according to the Ukrainian security services, a rebel fighter at the scene of the crash says the downed plane is a civilian plane.
Да я еще пока не разобрался, то что я не был возле основной части. Я только вот смотрю там, где начали первые тела падать. Там остатки внутренних кронштейнов, кресла, тела.
Понятно.
Вот так.
Вооружение есть что-нибудь?
Вообще ничего. Гражданские вещи, медицинские ошметки, там полотенце такое, туалетная бумага.
Neither recording can be independently verified at this point. Both the government and the pro-Russia separatists denied any responsibility for downing the aircraft. The world mourns the loss of nearly 300 souls on board. Our Jason Calvi joins us now with the story of these victims. Jason.
Yep. Brian, people from all walks of life, a nun, a prominent AIDS researcher, a Dutch senator. The Netherlands alone lost 189 lives. Other victims come from countries like Australia, the UK, and Malaysia.
Victims' families cry at the airport in Malaysia's capital. Their loved ones planned to fly here, but instead, 298 lives lost in the rubble of the shot-down plane. This Filipino family died in the crash. Irene Papillon sent a text message home before taking off.
She never says goodbye, never. Just now on her text message goodbye, she said, "Love you," which she seldom said.
An Indiana University grad student was also killed. 25-year-old Netherlands native Carleen Keitzer. President Obama confirms that one American citizen also died.
Quinn Lucas Schansman was killed. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family for this terrible loss.
Another victim was a World Health Organization employee. 49-year-old Glenn Thomas was traveling to the International AIDS Conference in Australia.
Glenn will be remembered for his ready laugh and his passion for public health. He will be greatly missed by those who had the opportunity to know him and work with him.
I'd like to call for a minute of silence.
prayers and memorials around the world. In Ukraine's capital, mourners leave flowers, candles, and stuffed animals at the Dutch embassy. And here in Washington, these Ukrainian Americans share in the grief.
I think everyone here is shocked at the scale of this disaster.
Malaysia Airlines says they're working to bring victims' families to the crash site. They're also giving relatives $5,000 US for their needs. Brian, concern and prayers from all of us this weekend.
Indeed. Thank you, Jason. Dr. Paul Gregory joining us via satellite from the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. He's a professor of economics. He's written extensively about the former Soviet Union and its economy, and is an expert on Russian politics and history. Dr. Gregory, who do you think bears the responsibility for the downing of Flight 17?
I don't think I know. Separatist mercenaries fired a Buk missile from East Ukraine at a checkpoint near the village of Snizhne, and it was this missile that brought the plane down. They thought they were shooting at a Ukrainian transport plane. Once they saw they'd hit the plane, they began to celebrate, writing Facebook messages that they had eliminated a fascist fighter, a fascist enemy plane incoming. They then learned that it was a civilian plane, which occasioned a number of telephone calls that have been intercepted between the separatist leaders and military intelligence.
So they have this missile launcher, though. These are separatists. It's interesting how we call them separatists. We call other people terrorists. But they've got this missile launcher. Where would they get such a weapon? Does this go right back to Russia and Vladimir Putin?
These things would not happen without Putin's permission. So the missile system came in either from Russia recently, because the State Department has been monitoring the movement of such equipment, or it could have been taken during the siege of a Ukrainian military base. But they had the missile system. We're not 100% confident where it came from, but they had it.
Now, Putin is washing his hands of this, saying, you know, we don't bear any responsibility. He's actually calling for peace here. Do you buy that?
Putin remarkably has not denied the facts that I just mentioned. His thing right now is to blame Ukraine for not accepting his generous peace terms, which were really capitulation to the Russian side. So it is remarkable that Putin has not explicitly denied the facts.
All right, so we have a civilian plane shot down, almost 300 lives lost. What effect will this have on relations between Ukraine, Russia, the U.S., Europe?
The relations between Russia and Ukraine will not be affected because they could not get worse. The significant effects we need to watch for are Europe and the United States vis-a-vis Russia. We also have to look for effects within Russia, because this may call into question Putin's leadership and could ultimately lead to his overthrow. So, as we say, this, I believe, is a possible game changer.
Very important, and we appreciate your insight. Dr. Paul Gregory, Research Fellow at Hoover Institution, Stanford University. Thank you for joining us tonight.
You're welcome.
Now, some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Israel has launched a ground invasion of Gaza. The Israeli army is confirming one of its soldiers has been killed, along with nearly a dozen Palestinians. Israeli Apache helicopters opened fire on the Al Jahora media building in Gaza City. The attack and explosion was caught on camera. According to reports, a Palestinian worker for one of the local media organizations in the building was injured. Our Rome correspondent Alan Holdren is here in our D.C. studios tonight. Alan, Pope Francis is very close to this situation, recently visiting the Holy Land and hosting the leaders at the Vatican for a prayer service. What did he do today?
Well, Brian, he called both of them on the telephone to invite them to find any way for dialogue and reconciliation there in the Israel-Palestine conflict. These are Presidents Mahmoud Abbas and Shimon Peres from Palestine and from Israel respectively, and he's become especially close to them since his June 8th invocation for peace with them in the Vatican Gardens. But just at last week's Angelus, he remembered that invocation for peace, and he said that he wants to break the cycle of hatred and violence.
The violence is so severe right now and in such a contrast to that peaceful Vatican Gardens prayer service. You were there.
The atmosphere there, Brian, was something completely different to the conflict scenes that we see on the television these days. It's really been sort of a major contrast to the message from Pope Francis, where he calls people together. This is his call for dialogue, call for encounter, and it's completely different from what he called for at that invocation for peace. And just this last Sunday at the Angelus, he said that prayer is never in vain, defending that prayer in the Vatican Gardens.
I believe that. We'll talk more with you just a little later. We're really grateful to have you here, Alan. Well, a federal appeals court has ruled for the second time that states cannot prevent gay people from getting married. A 3-judge appeals court panel in Denver today ruled a ban on same-sex marriage in Oklahoma is unconstitutional. The court ruled last month in a Utah case that gay couples have a constitutional right to wed. Lower courts struck down Utah and Oklahoma's voter-approved bans. The rulings are likely to be appealed to the Supreme Court, so those bans hold in place for now. Germany's chancellor is pledging sensible talks with the U.S. over differences on American spying. Angela Merkel says she doesn't expect a quick solution.
Trust can only be restored through talks and certain agreements. We will seek such talks, though I can't make any concrete announcements now.
A year of tension between the Western allies over spying and surveillance peaked last week. Berlin demanded the top U.S. intelligence official in Germany leave. This came in response to 2 cases of alleged American spying against Germany. As many as 100 homes have now been lost in a large wildfire burning in Washington state. People living in the tiny town of Pateros in north-central Washington have been told to evacuate. At least 30 homes burned in the Pateros area. We now know that 100 homes in that surrounding area were affected. A hospital in nearby Brewster also was told to move patients to another hospital. Coming up, the border crisis, what to do about it. The debate rages on. And it's been 45 years since astronaut Neil Armstrong first set foot on the moon. We look back. On Friday, July the 18th, thanks for joining us for EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. The flood of unaccompanied minors illegally crossing the border was discussed in a Senate panel hearing on Thursday. State and Justice Department officials tried to answer questions from the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. President Obama wants $3.7 billion in emergency funds to deal with the crisis. Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona argues that money would just be putting a Band-Aid on a much deeper problem.
The real goal is to stem the tide of unaccompanied minors. This is a crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis. And we've got to do something. Our concern, I can tell you mine and many of my colleagues' concern about the president's request is it seems to be geared at maintenance of a problem rather than fixing the problem and actually changing the incentives that go into it.
U.S. authorities say an estimated 60,000 to 80,000 children without their parents will cross the border this year. From Catholic University of America, Dr. Martha Cruz Zuniga joins us tonight. We hear a lot about the political side of this, the legal debate that's going on. We seldom hear about this arduous journey that these people are making. You know some people who have done this. How long does it take?
It takes about a month if you are coming from Central America. It takes about 2 months if you are coming from South America to reach the border of the U.S.
And what does it cost these individuals and families?
The cost is really high for an adult person. From South America, $15,000. From a person from Central America, $7,000. For children from Central America, about $4,000.
And who are they paying this money to?
They are paying the money directly to the smugglers, and they have to carry extra money for additional payments in the journey.
So they're paying cash to smugglers, yes. So I'm sure there are no guarantees along the way.
No guarantees, no documents, no invoices, no documents that are going to help them recover any money back.
We've We've seen the images of them on top of rail cars, and we heard one young lady say that she found herself underneath a rail car.
Yes.
It's got to be terribly dangerous.
It's a very dangerous journey. They could die in the process. Children can be victims of human trafficking, traffic of organs. They could be sexually abused, especially for girls and for women. So it's a very painful and dangerous journey, in addition to the economic cost.
What about the family members who don't go, who are home? Did they ever hear from their loved ones?
They don't have any news until the relative may reach the U.S. And if they don't reach the U.S., they may never hear back about them.
Now, you're an economics professor. A lot of people say this is an economic issue. How do you see it?
It is only partially an economic issue. It's a human issue. So there are more concerns than just the economic part of it. There is a lot of debate of advantages and cost of migration. And there are a lot of studies and still discussion on the issue. But I think the problem at this moment is a human problem that requires compassion and kindness on how to deal with people who are here suffering and struggling.
Well, thank you for helping us to see that side of it. Dr. Zuniga from Catholic University of America. We appreciate you. And scientists are hoping to learn much more about comets thanks to a space probe following one right now. This odd-shaped blob that you're looking at is something rarely seen, a close-up image of a comet. The comet-chasing Rosetta space probe captured this series of photos. Although the probe is still about 7,500 miles away from the comet, its special cameras show the comet's unusual shape. Astronomers say it appears the giant ball of ice has a split nucleus unlike any other seen before. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Remember hearing that? Sunday marks the 45th anniversary of the first lunar landing. Tonight, we flash back to this milestone in history.
At 15 seconds, guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 0. All engine running. We have a liftoff. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Shadow. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. 30 seconds forward. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're going to be busy for a minute.
Armstrong is on the moon. Neil Armstrong, 38-year-old American, standing on the surface of the moon. On this July 20th, 1969.
That's one small step for man. One giant leap for mankind. Oh, that looks beautiful from here, Neil. It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of United States. It's different, but it's very pretty out here. Beautiful, beautiful. Isn't that something? Magnificent sight out here. Magnificent desolation. Tranquility Base, Houston. Guidance recommendation is pings, and you're cleared for takeoff. Roger, understand. We're number 1 on the runway. 7, 6, 5, engine arm ascent. Beautiful. Very smooth. Very quiet ride. Apollo 11, this is Hornet, over. Apollo 1, this is Apollo 11, reach the launch course, our position 1330.
Up next, they call it Camp Twitch and Shout. Kids with Tourette's enjoying their summer. And our Rome correspondent, Alan Holdren, is here in D.C. tonight with a lot to talk about. We're grateful you're joining us for EWTN News Nightly. Good evening, I'm Brian Patrick. And kids who have Tourette's syndrome with its uncontrolled twitching and sometimes yelling are often met with stares, even rude comments. But a summer camp going on this week is helping children with Tourette's learn that their differences are okay. Everything is out in the open, and almost anything goes, even shouting. This is Camp Twitch and Shout, a place for children with Tourette's syndrome, a neurological disorder that makes people have different types of tics.
It was like, honestly, the coolest moment of my life. And it sounds weird, but everybody was just ticking. Kids were like throwing themselves on the floor. They were screaming at the top of their lungs. I have a tapping tic where I tap people 8 times on the shoulder.
Audrey Vogel came to the camp 4 years ago as a shy 14-year-old. Now she's a counselor in training, able to accept her Tourette's.
I was making this such a huge deal. I was like focusing my life around. I didn't even have friends because of it. And it was my choice. People weren't avoiding me, really. I was avoiding them because I didn't want them to ask about it.
The camp was started 6 years ago by Tricia Carden, whose son has Tourette's. It's now grown to more than 170 campers from across the country and abroad.
You know, our vision was to make a difference for our children, to make a difference with kids with Tourette, to have a place where they would be successful, to have a place where no one would question their disorder.
Something that happened to 11-year-old Blake. He thought his mom was lying to him when she told him there were other kids like him. The biggest challenge they face during the week-long camp is leaving at the end. They're having a great time. Children of God, just like every one of us. Pope Francis is demanding justice for the victims of Argentina's worst terrorist attack, and he's circumventing the Vatican media machine to get his message out. An amateur smartphone video message was recorded by a visiting close friend in Francis' Vatican hotel room. It airs today during the official commemoration of the 1994 bombing of a Jewish community center in Buenos Aires. 85 people died that terrible day. Claudia Eppelman of the Latin American Jewish Congress shot the video last month while visiting Francis at the Vatican. Alan Holdren covers practically every move of our Pope. He's our Rome correspondent, but here in D.C. with us tonight, you get the sense that Pope Francis just enjoys and delights in trying to find a way to get his message out, regardless of what it takes. Makes for a lot of interesting news stories, doesn't it?
That's right. It gives us a lot to choose from as these weeks go by. But, you know, there's some major moments that stick out of the course of the last year. And one was this selfie. I'm sure you've seen it. I think everybody's seen it. Him in St. Peter's Basilica with young people. And then also other events like when he was down in Calabria. He took a trip to southern Italy recently, and he stopped by the side of the road just going from one event to another. And he blessed a woman who was confined to a bed. And you can hear the family of this woman thanking Francis.
This is powerful. His car is pulling up right here. They're on the side of the road, and he actually gets out. Watch what happens here. He gets out and he kisses this person on the side of the road. Look at this.
And this has really become part of the course of it. Yeah, and he does this at every single general audience. This is why people are coming by the tens of thousands. The weekly general audience on Wednesday is full, week to week.
I wonder, you're at the Vatican all the time. I wonder if people there sometimes are like, what on earth is he going to do next?
The same unpredictability factor that goes for you and me goes for Vatican employees as well, I'm sure, and also for the security personnel that are trying to keep him safe. And, you know, speaking to people in the different Vatican offices, one person comes to mind that told me that, you know, there's no way of knowing what this Pope does, but we're behind him every step of the way. The Vatican exists to support the Pope.
Very interesting times. So tell us a little bit about your group there in Rome, your team. We seldom get a chance to chat with you about that.
Yeah, well, we've got actually 9 full-time people there in Rome, and 3 of them are from Spain, 3 of them are from the United States, and then we've got a German and 2 Italians. So we've got plenty of people representing, especially the 3 languages that we produce in. We do EWTN News Nightly services, but we also do services for other EWTN programming, like our weekly program, Vaticano.
And of course, CNA is now part of the EWTN family, and
that's right.
You're connected with them. Tell us about the app that's available for CNA.
It just came out, and it was 8 months in the making, and you can get CNA video, the regular articles and content, photographs from all of our offices worldwide, plenty of stuff from Rome on there as well.
I just downloaded it today. Just welcome you and your whole family back to the States. I know you're an American from Nebraska. It's good to see you again, Alan.
Well, it's nice to be back here. Thanks, Brian.
Enjoy your time here. And thank you for joining all of us here on EWTN News Nightly. Until Monday, follow us on Twitter, watch again on EWTN's YouTube page. You can like us on Facebook. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. Have a blessed weekend. Good night. God bless you.